This is where the next calendrical system comes into play. And that, of course, is called the Hob calendar and the calendar round. Now, the Hob calendar is different than the Tzolk'in in that it's very similar to the Gregorian calendar that we use today. It's based on the cycle of the sun and was used for agricultural, economic, and accounting activities. Much like the Tzolk'in calendar, it's also comprised of unals, and each day has its own hieroglyph and number. However, instead of using 13 unals for 260 days, the Hob calendar has 18 unals, giving it 360 days. Now, astronomers noticed that 360 days wasn't enough time for the sun to make it through a full solar cycle. They argued that the calendar should follow the cycle as closely as it could in order to be as accurate as possible. However, Mayan mathematicians didn't see it that way. They wanted to keep things simple, in increments of 20, just like their math system. The astronomers and mathematicians finally agreed on the 18 unals, with 5 nameless days called the Wayeb. The Wayeb, or Uayeb, is considered 1 month of 5 days, and it's thought to be a very dangerous time. The Mayans believed the gods rested during this time, leaving the earth unprotected. The Mayans performed ceremonies and rituals during the Wayeb in hopes that the gods would return once again. While this calendar was longer than the Tzolk'in, the Mayans wanted to create a calendar that would record even more time. For this reason, the Tzolk'in and Hob calendars were combined to form the calendar round. In the calendar round, the 260 days of the Tzolk'in calendar are paired with the 360 days and 5 nameless days of the Hob. The two calendars are matched the same way the Tzolk'in day names and numbers are. Think back to the illustration we mentioned before. This gives the calendar round 18,890 unique days, a time period of around 52 years. And neither the Tzolk'in nor the Hob calendars measured more than 1 year. The Mayans wanted to record history and decided to create a calendar that would give them a longer span than a year. At the time, the calendar round was the longest calendar in Mesoamerica. Historians of the time, however, wanted to record Mayan history for generations to come in the future. They wanted a calendar that would take them through hundreds, even thousands of years. Enter the long count calendar. Unfortunately, the long count calendar isn't as simple as combining two calendars together to get new dates. It's a little bit more complicated and abstract. In order to understand the long count, you first need to become familiar with a few terms. 1 day, kin, 20 days, uinal, 360 days, tun, 7,200 days, katun, and 144,000 days, baktun. The span of the long count calendar is called the Great Cycle and lasts approximately 5,125.36 years. To find the long count date that corresponds with any Gregorian date, you'll need to count the days from the beginning of the last Great Cycle. But determining when the last cycle began and matching that up to a Gregorian date is quite a feat. English anthropologist Sir Eric Thompson set out to determine the date, and he looked to the Spanish Inquisition for help. What transpired was known as the Thompson correlation. Events that occurred during the Inquisition were recorded on both the Mayan long count calendar and the Gregorian calendar. Scholars then gathered dates that matched on both calendars and compared them to the Dresden Codex, one of 4 Mayan documents that survived the Inquisition. This codex confirmed the date, long thought by Thompson to be the beginning of the current Great Cycle, August 13th, 3114 BC. Now that we have the beginning date of the Great Cycle, let's put the long count into practice. We'll take a date that's familiar to many Americans, July 20th, 1969, the day Apollo 11 landed on the moon. In the long count calendar, this date is written as 12.17.15.17.0. You'll notice that there are 5 number places in this date. Reading from left to right, the first place signifies the number of Baktuns since the beginning of the Great Cycle, 12. In this case, there have been 12 Baktuns, or 1,728,000 days, or the length of the Baktun, 144,000 days times 12, since August 13, 3114. The second place relates to the number of Katuns that have taken place, and then it continues on to the right with the number of tuns, unals, and kins. So that basically, friends, is, in a nutshell, the three main calendars of the Mayans: the Tzolk'in, the Hab, and the Long Count. And the Long Count spans many thousands of years and is very mind-boggling to think of how a civilization so primitive as the Mayans could come up with such complex astronomical and mathematical theorem and ideas at that point in history. But if you look at their fantastic architecture and art and language, you can see the intricacy of intellectual development. It does sound strange, or seems strange, however, that such large astronomical calculations of math and time could come from a civilization considered so primitive by so many people. Well, I guess that's why there's so much mystery surrounding the Mayans, though. So, carrying on, that is basically, according to HowStuffWorks.com, how the three calendar systems work. It's really interesting. I watched a lecture by a man named Ian Lungold, who I believe now has passed away. But his lecture series was based on an earlier book that he read that inspired him to look into the Mayan calendar dates and the December 21st, 2012 prophecy. And he had some interesting things to say about this particular date. He spoke about the current time that we're in and how over the course of many tens of thousands of years, or even millions, you could use this calendar to go back millions of years even, and you could watch evolutionary stages taking place. And with each evolutionary leap, you could make a connection to time derivations of the Mayan calendar. And the closer we get to our time, he states that within certain suns of the Mayan calendar system, there are evolutions that take place. And the time span between these evolutions from one sun to the next, and all the time in therein, becomes shorter and shorter and shorter up until the point of where we are now. So that instead of 100 million years of evolution taking place, where we're at now is basically every 20 days or some sort of incredible evolution taking place. And he has gone from the macroscopic to the microscopic, claiming that all the evolution that's taking place right now isn't necessarily physical adaptation for the environment, but an intellectual evolution and adaptation taking place, i.e. consciousness itself and our place in the universe, which really does go hand in hand with the prophecy of the Maya. Speaking of calendars, the Mayan pyramid at Chichen Itza was actually a physical calendar, for all of you that didn't know that. Each side of this has a staircase with 91 steps and a platform for a total of 365 steps. And the dates inscribed into the pyramids all were written in the long count format. So what does this all mean? It means that every 13,000 years or so, we enter the exact galactic plane of the Milky Way, 26,000 years to complete a full sine wave cycle. But how did they know all this? They had many references to the galaxy's center, a black hole, thousands of years before we even discovered we had a black hole in the center of the galaxy. We had only just discovered in December of 2008, I'm sourcing news.bbc.co.uk on this, that this was the case. The Mayans called it the womb of creation.